welcome to our new episode of our webinar. We do this bi-weekly, and once in a while, we insert a deal webinar in between. But for most part, we do it every 2 weeks. And these are educational, and we don't really try to promote anything during these webinars. We do have a very exciting guest today, Rashmi. She's the founder of Aarcstone Capital Partners, and she has made a name for herself in real estate investing, focusing mostly on multifamily properties. And she's been involved in over 438 units, and she is co-GPing on 3 upcoming projects concurrently. She can explain to you how she is able to do all that. Our professional journey began in technology recruiting, where she pitches opportunity, team building, and spearheading numerous recruiting initiatives. And as you can see, that laid the foundation for her subsequent venture into technology program management, where she focused on digital transformation and refining operational efficiencies in tech-centric projects. So those skills that she mastered, she was easily able to transfer it into the real estate, right? Team building, the exact same skill. So after years in the corporate sector, Rashmi took a bold step away from traditional employment to carve out a niche in consulting, where she helps companies streamline their operations and implement strategic improvements. This move further paved the way for her venture into real estate investing. So she's also passionate about community betterment and delivering results to our investors through her leadership at Aarcstone Capital Partners. At the heart of her mission, she has the desire to cultivate community bonds and boost financial literacy among youngsters. We've been talking a lot, actually, almost every week for the past few months. And I get to know her, and then we actually talking about starting a financial literacy program for kids. So that one got my attention personally, because I'm very passionate about that. I never had the courage to actually take a big step to actually do anything about it. So when I heard that she's trying to do that, I was very happy about it, and I will help any way that I can. So I'm going to let George also talk for a little bit, and then we'll give the mic to Rashmi.
All right, thanks, Bayo. So I'm George Ozoude. I'm an orthopedic surgeon based out of Houston, Texas. I have my own private practice, Movement Orthopedic Institute. It's a direct pay private practice that I started 2.5 years ago. Before that, I was employed with the University of Texas for about 7 years. And I started investing in real assets, mostly multifamily syndication, just like Rashmi, and started trying to build my way towards financial freedom and get rid of the golden handcuffs. So Rashmi's topic definitely is going to hit home tonight. And I started investing, like I said, as an LP, invested in over 25 deals since 2016, ranging across multifamily to agriculture to oil and gas, mineral rights, and medical office building, of course. And over the last 2 years, I've become really passionate about getting other physicians into these investments as well, in order for them to have the option, at least, to sit there at the bargaining table and be able to confidently leverage their talents and their skills, be able to either start their own practice or get better terms on their current employed practice. I just love the idea of having that leverage and the option, that optionality. And I really dove into that, and started my own investment company, a syndication company, Time Health Capital. We've gone on to invest in 4 deals, about 900 doors, and about 50 million of assets under management, soon to be 75 million under management. So really excited to really dive into this. I think it's such an important topic for physicians, of course, but for all professionals who are looking for more options. So with that, I'll kick it back over to Bayo.
Okay. I'm going to just say just 1 minute about myself. So I'm a pulmonary critical care physician for those just joining us. I just recently also moved away from W2 job this January, actually. And all that was possible because passive income, I guess in my case, is technically semi-passive because I'm also an operator. So I do run the operations, but it's very freeing for me. And I was just talking to Rashmi about how there's so much things you could do. I'm able to hire nurse practitioners now and also free up my time a little bit more. And then went and get even more contracts with rehabs and places. So basically, you could basically expand as much as you like. So I felt like cutting off the parachute was a difficult move, but ultimately it was the best move. And I'm not going to lie that, the real people that are doing it, that are the bold people, are the people that doesn't have anything, right? They don't have any passive income, nothing whatsoever, and they just say, "Let me just go my own way." But I think the safest way to do it is that way, where you build up enough passive income, enough to cover your living expenses at least, and then you start doing whatever what you actually enjoy and what you love to do. So I'm going to give it to Rashmi. Just I know we introduced you. You can talk a little bit about yourself for a few minutes, and then we can get to the questions.
Yeah. Again, thank you both. What an impressive background and what you guys have done. And thanks for having me here. This is truly honored to be here sharing sort of my background. And obviously, I know we've talked about just the financial literacy portion of it with kids. And it ties in, I feel like, in my journey as well. Which is why I'm so passionate about being able to give back to the community, not just in terms of developing communities, but I think also giving back to the youth and providing them sort of the opportunity and the know-how to be able to excel in what they do versus having to be in your late 40s and having to pivot and say, oh my God, no, I don't want to do a W-2 anymore. Had I only known that there were other ways, probably earlier on, maybe things would have been different. But I think there's a time and place for everything and time and place for your sort of journey. But I'm obviously grateful that I was able to take the step. It was definitely not an easy decision to say, all right, I'm going to give up my 20 years of experience of what I've known before working in corporate. And I think I was 5 years at Amazon when I decided to move in a different direction. Definitely grateful for that. I made use of the opportunity to pivot, also for other reasons. But yeah, again, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here and share sort of my journey and thoughts around the pivot that I had to make from W-2 to what I do today.
Awesome. There's some few questions, of course, George interjects that we think about. So I remember when we were talking about the 4 quadrant, right? From Robert Kiyosaki, right? About self-employed, investor, being a business person, or W-2 or employed, right? And some people are able to be in all of it, right? I was at one point. I have business. I have some that are almost like self-employed, and I have, was employed. So obviously, I have a different view of W-2 work. Like it's not all, the worst thing in the world, and business is not for everyone. So just wanted to know first, what's your own overall view of W-2 work? What do you think? What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I think in all honesty, I think there's definitely a place for W-2 work, right? And I say W-2, maybe it's 9 to 5, it's whatever, define it whatever way. It's W-2 is just a tax like category, isn't it? But I think it has definitely a lot of benefits. Just from a stability standpoint, it has, yes, one might argue that it's less flexible. It does provide stability and employment, consistent getting in your whatever check, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I think there's a sense of comfort in that to individuals and families who have responsibilities. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a place overall for having that steady income. One can always argue whether it's something that is for everyone, but I think there is definitely a place for it, for sure.
Yeah, I like to add to that because we're medical professionals, particularly. And so a lot of times we may have mentees who are coming up from their training. And I talk to my ortho mentees and I tell them W2 has some advantages to it. So it's not like completely ruled out. You can consider, number one, like you're saying, that predictability of income, which is huge for us coming out of training because we have a mountain of student loans. And starting your own practice, it would be hard enough. But imagine if you had student loans and a family to support, it is nice to just have something steady to just pay off your student loans as you get started. Also, we are coming out of training, but it's different. Everyone will tell you, every doctor will tell you, it's different when you get out into practice. You like learn so much more when you're like the one. And so those first few years out of practice, having a stable practice, stable income, so you can just focus on learning, you don't have to focus on running a business, can be also huge as well. And then the last thing I tell them is, even if you don't like it, which I actually didn't know I didn't like it until I got in it, it's good to learn what you don't like what you don't like about it, and then what you would change. Because all the while I was in private practice or employed practice, I was like making mental and physical notes about, all right, I wouldn't do it like this if I had my own practice.
Yeah.
So you can use it as a research.
Yeah, no, I think that's so valuable. On the same lines, I think a W-2 also provides you an opportunity to be able to develop those skills, right? Even whether to know that you love it or whether you know that this is not something that you want to focus on. You're actually learning at someone else's expense in a way. But just understanding that, I think, is valuable and definitely something, especially for like what you said. I have a son who's going to be going off to college in another few months here. So it's very similar. They come out of college with student loan and everything. Just getting into a W-2 definitely provides them the opportunity to hone in on certain skills and gives them a launch pad to kick things off earlier on. And then it depends on how they want to be able to leverage that and build upon those skills. I think a W-2 definitely provides that. And in different fields, right? It's not the same across the board. Clearly, I think there are some careers where you might have leverage to be able to experiment a little bit, but and go out on your own. But some, I think, in some professions, it's just easier to be able to have that steady income coming in and also being able to build on your skill set.
Well, awesome.
So we talked about skill set. And Bio mentioned this, is some people are not made for entrepreneurship, some people are not made for W-2. How would you describe the skill set for each of those? An employed worker versus someone who's gonna do all the entrepreneurial work.
Yeah, I think if you think about just economy, just at large, I think there's a place for an entrepreneur and there's a place for a worker. And not that one is better than the other. I think there's just a place in society for both. And it really just depends, I think, on the individuals and where they come from and the characteristics that they bring to the table. You can't have an entrepreneur without an employee and vice versa, right? I think it's the way I see it. I think there's a harmony in which society operates, and you need to be able to find sort of your strengths and if one is a leader and a visionary, then you let them lead with that. Versus if I know I'm better off being an integrator and doing my task is different, then I'll hone in on that. If that was to be a W-2, then sure. But I think so there's definitely a place for both just within society. And going back to your question about like skill set specifically, I think it's so individually driven, isn't it? I heard you mention saying you went in thinking that you probably love certain thing and then found out that's not something that you enjoyed doing day to day. Similarly, like we were talking earlier, you're so passionate about getting into surgery and like doing that for 3 hours. Oh my God, I can't even think about it, let alone I don't have the skill. But just that, right? I don't think it's everyone's cup of tea. I think there are some people who are just naturally good. And maybe it also comes with time, right? Because you're stacking your habits around there and you're putting in your reps. So you're growing that skill set. And it's similar to even an employee where you're building upon that skill set. And I say this just looking, reflecting even on my own journey. I actually went to school studying, I actually majored in sculpture. So what I do today has nothing to do with what my education is, what my background is. But in a way, I still go back and relate to what I've learned. Because it gave me the opportunity to be creative. It gave me the opportunity to think outside the box. It gave me the opportunity to be able to not see things just black or white, that there's another way of doing things. So these are all things that I think is very relevant as you go into the workplace. Obviously, it's not going to be, especially for this where like you're a medical professional, you need those skills. Obviously, that's very core. But for someone else in a business realm, I think it's just slightly different, and the way you would apply it would be different.
Yeah, I gotta say, I didn't think I'd be an entrepreneur when I first started my W-2. I thought I would go up the academic ladder, and I discovered I was an entrepreneur. I
See,
just,
that's awesome.
I discovered that I really, after experiencing some of the friction of not just being, only just being an employee, but just the system, I was like, I had an urge to want to change it and innovate and be creative and flex that creative muscle. So it's interesting how you describe, you discover it sometimes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep. I've always also wondered, as it, for example, before COVID, I've already wanted to went either locum private practice, but somehow COVID hits, and also I developed basically got worried or scared of in some way. I would say my transition was slow. So for yours, did you just wake up one day or just plan it and just be like, quit? Or did you do it like slowly? Because you can do that too. You can start doing 3 days, then part-time and slowly. And what do you recommend in general? Like,
Yeah.
so,
And I think it's also very individual, right? I think everyone has to look back and reflect on where they are and what's important to them. So it is very personal, because I think like you have to know why are you leaving a W-2? It's okay to say, hey, you know what, listen, we have substantial income as a family, or I individually have a substantial income, so I don't need to go work. I have enough savings, whatever the case may be. I think everyone has like their own sort of narrative there. And for me, I think you want to look back on what is important to you at any given time, and then be able to let that sort of dictate what you want to do. In my case, to be honest, I actually, in a way, did cut the umbilical cord off from the W-2 in a way. But when I think back, I think it was work in progress. I knew I was heading in that direction, so I went from a leadership role where I was managing a team to then pivoting and doing an, individual role, thinking that I'll have a little bit more time and a freedom of time, but it was not quite the same. That's when I decided that no, maybe it is for me to actually go in and have like more time. And fortunately, I do have a husband who's working and was supportive, and I was able to make that pivot. But perhaps not everyone is in that same position. So you have to look at it individually. But I think once why you're doing that, you will be able to say, all right, maybe I won't go spend extra money on something that I might not need, and hone in on what you absolutely need, and then go the entrepreneurial route. It really, I think, just depends on individuals. And honestly, I don't really have a clear thought saying one would have to choose way or that. I think it is really what your individual journey sort of dictates. So I would urge people to go back and reflect on why they're doing what they're doing, and see whether they're able to sustain themselves and sustain their lifestyle. And sometimes I think it does is it okay for us to scale back a little bit? Do we absolutely need to go buy everything that's out there? And so on. So I think those are some decisions that one would have to make individually, and then say, yes, let's see if we can do that. But I always believe a crawl, walk, run, even when I'm implementing projects, like slowly pace yourself. So I think that might be a good strategy to ease yourself off slowly versus just saying, okay, one fine day you wake up and you're like, okay, I am done. I'm not doing this anymore, without having a clear plan for how you're going to move through the next day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I to piggyback off of that, I have a question about just like granular. What strategies or tactics even could you use if you do have a 9 to 5, or maybe even longer, a 8 to 6? You're working doubles. Your time is just consumed.
Valuable, right?
Your
Yeah.
time is just completely consumed. What strategies do you have for someone who wants to gradually increase their passive income streams or increase their side hustle, even though their work, their W-2 is commanding their time and their bandwidth, so their energy as well? What are strategies for that?
Yeah, I think this was something that I had to go back and implement myself. And I think it's something that's helped me a lot is having one 12-week plan and really breaking down and being very deliberate about what you're doing and focus on the one thing. Focus on the one thing that you want to get accomplished, whether it's in that day or within that week, and focus on that and get that done because and celebrate that win, because know that, oh my God, like I did it. And it could be as simple as like you are working on just, I'll go back to just underwriting or something related to real estate, but it can be anything. It can be, hey, I want to have dinner with my kids at least three times a week. That was actually one of my goals because we weren't even doing that because everyone had different schedules and what have you. And the other was, hey, I want to be able to underwrite at least 2 deals in a week. It was things like that. It's outlining what it is that is reasonable that you're able to accomplish and make sure you do it and celebrate that win at the end of the day that you did it. And if you have someone who's a buddy or like your partner or your spouse, whoever, and you create that sort of accountability team, that's also valuable, right? Because now you are not just taking action on it, but you're also holding yourself accountable because someone else is watching and or you're working with someone else who's helping you move through next steps. So I think that was another that was super valuable. And in all honesty, I can tell you one of the biggest things that happened to me as part of my journey in multifamily investing is actually where when I got into it, it was really taking action was super important, but it was becoming extremely challenging. So one of the things that I actually ended up doing was almost forcing it upon me and putting it into a time box, meaning that I created a 100 days to 100 doors challenge. And I had other people sign up for this and opt into it. So what ended up happening is we all had other things that we were doing. We were all working outside of just life, right? We all had families, kids, between whether it was fencing or soccer or whatever it was, people had stuff that they were doing. But we committed to meeting every day and we held not each other accountable during that time. And at the end of it ended up, we obviously have bragging rights today because we ended up meeting our goal of that 100 days to 100 doors. But I think what that gave us was we focused on one thing, or we focused on one thing that we wanted to accomplish. So we had a very clear goal of what we want to do. And we took action every day, even if it was a little bit. Sometimes we did, some days we did a lot. Some days we did, it was very short, but we still did it. And I think that's what ended up, it's almost like habit stacking, right? You end up just stacking that by doing little and little every day. I think that's super valuable because I totally understand, especially when you're working and you have a W-2 and you're looking to grow another business or what have you, time is of the essence and it's super valuable. And you don't want to like compromise by not spending time with your family or not having that with your family. But yet at the same time, like it's okay to say no to things. And I think getting to say no, like I've actually gotten really good at that. Like just in my last, I want to say about a year, I think I've gotten good in saying no, I'm not going to do that. Versus earlier, if someone asked me, oh, do you want to hang out? I would be like, sure, let's figure out a date when we can do that. Versus now I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not available because my priority is different. And that's what I need to get done. So I think it's those kind of things. It's those little things that actually matter.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe Bio and I can share what we've done in our W-2s when we were employed. For me, I realized I needed to free up time. I was trying to find pockets of time, even through my workday, to
Yeah.
just devote something towards my side hustle or my exit. And for me, that was learning. I had to educate and learn about real estate investing. So I needed to find time to do that. So driving to work started becoming my learning education
Yeah.
time. In between 3 hour cases was my learning time because the next case might take 45 minutes to start. So the earbuds went in, the podcast on real estate investing went on. And
Yeah.
so I really started to find pockets of time throughout my day, started to decrease time spent, like you said, prioritizing away from time, things that were wasting my time. So TV or social media, you start creating time in essence. What about you, Baya?
Absolutely. Just to add to that, sorry.
Oh, for sure. Please add.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, just to add to that, I think it was going back to when I say create a plan. I think it's creating a plan, but also be very intentional and deliberate. Put it on your schedule. It's not just creating a plan and saying, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to find a time to do this today. It's no, you do this at this time and blocking the time to do it. I think was also something as a strategy that helped me a lot, even if it was to your point, what you just mentioned, because now I don't really commute because I don't have my commute time is lost. So I don't, otherwise I was like an Audible junkie. But now if I want to listen, I do that when I'm walking my dog. So I do two things at one time. I also do my audio and then I walk my dog and things like that. Try to incorporate what are other things that you're anyway doing that is, but it's productive work, right? Like this, you need to pay attention. Like when I'm walking, I can still pay attention to what I'm listening to when I'm walking my dog, but I probably will not do the same when I'm doing that, going to the gym. So you just have to figure out where you can take and steal time from what you're doing. And I think if people are deliberate about the time that that they're doing. Actually, one of the other exercises that I did before I actually implemented this was I actually made a log of everything that I did, irrespective. Like I didn't judge myself. I didn't like, there was no judging, nothing. I just, everything that I did, even if it was like I just binged on Netflix, whatever it was, like I just logged that time. Like that awareness actually created so much more to my understanding of, oh, this is where I'm spending so much of my time. So this is what I need to trade and switch. And I think that awareness was also something that was super valuable in my journey as I was changing, moved away from moved away from W-2 to the entrepreneurial world. The other thing is also being able to delegate, which was something that even though I had done that in my corporate life as a leader and driving a team, it was different when you're an entrepreneur and trying to do this for your own business. So it was, yeah, just being really deliberate about that and outlining what the SOPs are and being able to use like a virtual assistant or delegating the work to someone else and following up with them to make sure that it meets your quality and standard, I think has also worked really well.
That's such an interesting point. I look back and I think of my W-2 days and I almost realize like I could have had a VA during my W-2 days, like someone to help. And you don't think of that because it's like you have an employer. Why do you need an assistant? If you were to have an assistant, your employer would hire one for you. But who's to say that you can't hire your own personal VA, even though you have an employer as a W-2, if you have enough money to support that. And that might free up some money. It actually might save time that you use to go make a return on another investment of your energy or your money, your time. It's interesting that you talked about VA. Go ahead,
Well,
bye.
in hindsight, yes, the same thing. That's what's happening to me now, right? So after I got like, the first was the two nurse practitioners are coming in, and now they're acting as a scribe, right? And they free me up so much that I was like, let's say you make, many people here probably make close to maybe $400,000, $500,000. If you sacrifice 100K, it's probably worth it, right? To hire, like you said, but you won't think of it that way because I remember that's one of the reasons actually why I left the job was we were asking for nurse practitioners and they wouldn't give it to us. So it's interesting how your mind does not expand much when you're employed in a way, because you got that dependent mindset. But then immediately you have to survive, you have to make it work yourself. Then you start finding other ways to free yourself, cut costs, increase revenue. And that's the exciting part. So for me, autonomy was the major reason why I decided, for me, the work itself is not, my wife knows, she said, look, I know you're going to just fill your space up. Every time I'm like, look, I got Wednesday afternoons off now. I got Fridays afternoon off now. Then, so now then I started using that for functional medicine. So you just like, look, I know that you just like to work, but the thing is that I don't have to. So that to me, it's so much more important mentally for me. And then, so that's my major reason. And also scaling. Like I said, you can't really scale W2, right? You could work more, you could pick extra. And I also just figured that out recently about how much my time is worth. I was telling my wife, I said, look, I feel like my 8 a.m. to noon is worth $300 an hour. From noon to 7 p.m. is worth like $450. And anytime after 7 p.m. really is worth about $1,000 an hour, because it's puts more pressure on sleep, quality of life, family time, so much more things in the evening. I was just like thinking of it that way. And I can tell you, with W2, you could still work just as much hours, like work till midnight, and you get paid the same anyways. So yeah, so mostly autonomy. And so yeah, I'm glad to be out. But it wouldn't be possible though without some form of, because also depend on your situation, like you said. If you have double income, it might be different from you. We are like single income, just me, right? So, so you have to plan it. And I couldn't really have just said, you know what, I hate this job, quit. You have to be strategic, have some, passive income or something at the background before I was able to do so.
So I had a question about kind of the recent obvious pandemic that happened and a huge shift that caused away like the great resignation, right?
Yeah.
A lot of W-2 workers went out and just wanted to start their own thing, their own side hustle. They really leaned into that. So where do you think, in the aftermath of all that, where do you think the W-2 work is going in the future, in say 5, 10, and 50 years? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point, I think there's definitely been, it's almost a paradigm shift, right? Not just from an employee standpoint, but I think also for employers, where they've seen where employees have actually quit because they've not had the flexibility, or employers are not being flexible. So I think that increase in remote work is definitely something that's here to stay. People like that trend towards remote work, and just accelerated by COVID, is not something that's going to go away, even though a lot of companies now are moving to the hybrid model. Maybe not all of them, but majority of them have some sort of a hybrid model. And I see that definitely being something that's going to continue. I think one of the other things that we've all seen, look at what ChatGPT and like AI has done to work. And I think there's obviously a lot more to come. It's like a baby, right? Like how long have we had it? Like a year? But look at the amount of change that it's brought. I know there are some employers who've adopted it, but employees are fearful of it. And some who might not even know how to use it, or use it to basically get better at what they're doing, whether it's their job or what have you. So there's definitely going to be like a change there that's going to happen in the next, I want to say, less than 5 years. There's obviously going to be change. There's going to be new jobs that are probably going to emerge just as part of it. Whoever thought there was going to be prompt engineering as like a title, or a prompt engineer as a title 2 years ago? Right? But today it is. And so there are going to be some of those newer jobs and a scope of jobs that are going to be there, that like AI is going to obviously bring. And I think we post COVID, I think one of the other things that has happened is just the trend or the focus on employee well-being, not just from an employer, but also from as an employee. One is thinking about just the harmony that they want to bring in into their lives and emphasizing what that looks like for them as individuals and really driving what that impact is and building awareness for that is something that I've also seen some of like companies incorporate that into their onboarding of employees. I think that's something that's, again, we're here to stay, just mental health being core to that. Other big change that I've seen, which I think is going to continue, is just greater workforce diversity. Again, I think that's something that's we're all going to have to embrace, right? A lot of the companies are talking about, hey, how do we improve sort of diversity? How do we improve equity and inclusion and all of that? But I think that's just going to intensify even more over the coming few years as we're all looking at skills sort of reformation, right? They're all going to almost have to reform and relearn certain skills that we had to get better at. I don't know if you guys use AI or ChatGPT within what you guys do, but I think it forces us as entrepreneurs to actually use that in a way to optimize our time better. We've actually had to acquire that skill, and I feel like I'm constantly trying to get better at understanding what generative AI can do and what is ahead of us. So I think individuals will have to adapt to that as well. And the companies that are going to provide that landscape for their employees to upgrade their skills and take on and build on these are actually going to be the ones that will have sort of that longevity from an employment standpoint for their employees.
So W-2 is not going anywhere. It's just going to look different.
It's just going to look different. Yeah, for sure. I think it's that stability people are going to still want to a certain extent. It might change, but I don't think like W-2 we're not all going to become entrepreneurs. There is going to be a little bit of a balance. It might tend to be a little bit more different. Like maybe if from a W-2, it might become a gig economy, like where people are just like freelancing and opting into work that they want to pick and they want to get involved in versus not ones that they don't. Those are some changes that we will see. The percentage of W-2 might reduce, but it might not be that it's going to go away.
I agree. I think it swings and pendulums depending on what's happening in the socioeconomic landscape. I think it's swinging now towards more entrepreneurial folks. So people, great resignation, people leaving.
Yeah.
But there could be a time where it swings back to W-2. But hopefully the world's a better place at a certain balance. And hopefully we find the right balance where there's enough creative visionaries going out there making big changes, disrupting like all sectors and for the better. I guess I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one can always argue that, hey, what happens if W-2s do go away? We don't have W-2s. Then obviously, what does W-2 actually bring to us? It brings us security. We pay a large amount of what it's taxes, right? It's what employers and employees pay into, whether it's through Social Security, Medicare, whatever. So these are some things that we're opting into as part of the W-2 employee. Now, if that's going to reduce, then obviously there is going to be an impact to what that's going to look like if everyone was to become an entrepreneur and they're not quite paying into that. Are there other sources of income? What's going to happen macro economy wise? How is that going to fall into place? I think those are all things that probably are beyond a little bit of my pay grade, but I think there's definitely going to be changes there, and it can go either way. But I think a large part of like the W-2 piece will be there. It might not be the same percentage of people in that space.
I also think it varies by generation, right? The baby boomers, they held it down. W-2,
Yeah.
they're proud of. I know my dad is be like, I worked for this bank for 30 years.
Yeah.
And he's proud of it. And for me, in my mind, I was like, man, you probably could have made more if you moved. But for him, that was important, the stability. And so I think our generation, I think we felt like we're behind I wanted to basically skip forward a little bit. And that, I feel like that's one of the reasons why we have so much high percentage of entrepreneurship. I'm not sure if it's of all generations, but it's high up there. And then maybe next generation is going to just chill again. They're relaxed. So you're talking about taxes. It came to my mind again. So what are the tax advantages that you've seen as an entrepreneur now versus W-2?
Yeah. Oh my God. Huge, right? In all honesty, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me was one, we were two-income household. When you're in that bracket and you're paying taxes with nothing to offset it as W-2 employees, you're essentially just paying those taxes. There's no write-off, there's nothing you could do and leverage any sort of deductions versus as an employee, as an employer, or even as an entrepreneur, there are some advantages. And more so because the space that I'm in multifamily, I think there's just those tax advantages are significant, right? Whether you're claiming bonus depreciation or on the cost side, there are opportunities there just from a real estate standpoint that's there. But even if you're not in the real estate space, I think just as an entrepreneur, you're able to use a lot of other opportunities to be able to take those deductions and not pay the huge amount of taxes that otherwise you would just as a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
Guys,
have
you seen that in your journey? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, for example, my CPA, when we talked, so I had over $1 million of depreciation to use. And then I've never reached there before until last year. So I finally got there. I'm like, no, I'm like, okay, this must be great. So the maximum you could deduct was $540,000. So, which, yes, it's nice to make more, but the truth is, so you then have to keep the other depreciation for later. And then it was like, but if you're private practice, it's essentially unlimited. You can do it on the business side, and then you deduct on the W-2 that you pay yourself, right? You pay yourself like a portion salary too. So, and then you pay yourself like a smaller amount of salary. And then, so anyway, so it was structured in such a way that if you have 2 million.
Ray, I think you went on mute.
So I'm not sure how, it said the host mute me. I'm not sure how I mute myself. Sorry about that. So yeah, so definitely a lot of tax advantage to having a business apart from the deduction, travel, CME. You don't have 5,000 CME. You could give yourself 50,000 if you want in money to go for conferences, right? And so yeah, absolutely. And if you couple it with real estate, it's very useful because now you don't really have a limit to how much you can deduct. So
yeah, I also think that was one of the big things I thought about as I transitioned was thinking about how much gets taken away from me as a W-2 versus if I start my own practice, yeah, I might make a little less, especially in the beginning, but how much am I going to save like in taxes? And does it actually become ahead? Do I actually become ahead if I've become really good at taking deductions and using a very good tax strategist and a tax planner, combining that with passive income? So it really starts to become real. Wait a minute, I don't just have to rely on this W-2. I can step out, and even if it's slow to start, I actually still might be ahead because I can do a lot more with my taxes as either a 1099 or a solo, your C Corp, S Corp, all these different entities and tax strategies, tax vehicles. You can get way more creative, and it opens up the door a little bit more for me. Even while I was with my W-2, it became more tangible, you know.
yep.
Who doesn't want to save,
questions?
right? We all want to be able to have whatever we put in. It's money that you definitely want to be able to pay what's due for sure. But yet at the same time, hey, you want to be able to take home whatever you can. You put in all the work and you want to be rewarded for that. And in I think all honesty, the way even the tax codes are written and so on, is really to be able to empower entrepreneurs to be able to do that. Like you're obviously getting more benefits by hiring employees and being able to do that. So I think there's definitely benefit there.
Yeah. If I just noticed that the guests, we don't have questions. So if you have any questions, you can actually come off mute and ask questions. So we can use
Maybe
this
the wall has a question.
Okay.
No, it's a joke.
Oh,
There's,
yeah, sometimes.
there's like 10 DeWalls on the call.
Okay. In the meantime, while people are looking for that, can you tell us a little bit what your next project is? Or actually, you have 3 projects coming on. So let us know. You're like a beast. You have 3. She has 3 deals ongoing at the same time. Impressive. So tell us about it, and also how can people find you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So really what I'm working on right now is I am on a deal as a co-GP that I'm raising capital on. We're going to close end of this month. And the other one is the one that we actually, as part of the 100 Days to 100 Dose Challenge, is 2 projects that we are currently doing due diligence on. And the one is we're going to close again in another 30 days. Yeah, just in the thick of things between due diligence and getting through the raise on those really fun projects. They're unfortunately right now B, so I can't really share a whole lot of information, but very excited for the opportunity on both of those. And then the subsequent one is also the one that I'm raising for, which is part of that 100 days. So they're all they're in 2 different locations, but happy to share if people are interested and want to know more. I can share with them some of the other projects that are there in the works, maybe not this one particularly. I'll share my information. I'll post it in the link. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, LinkedIn, and I can post that information. Let me find it.
And then you have a website?
Yeah, I'm actually going to post all of that
on the chat.
Yeah.
And you can say it too.
Yeah,
I like the name, by the way.
What's that?
I said, I like the Aarcstone. I told her, I said, Aarcstone sounds almost like a $100 billion company.
Oh my God. One day. We're not yet, but we will be. Yeah, I love that. Actually, I think I mentioned it to you the other day. It's really just, obviously the thought was, we wanted to be instrumental and like that, like a keystone, right, to an arc. It's that one pillar that holds everything together. But more importantly, I think it's my kids' names and like our family names. We have all our initials in there. So I think it has more meaning that way.
It came together nicely. Anybody have any questions? Someone asked about how to get involved. Yeah, so you can schedule.
Yeah, I actually posted in the chat. If you want to connect with me, you can, book a call. I also posted my LinkedIn, so feel free to send me a message. Happy
you
to
can
connect.
schedule a call. Yeah, and then So if anybody don't have any questions, and then any more questions, Joy? Oh, hold on. There's one question. So we'll do this. How do individuals invest in your group multifamily projects?
Yeah.
How do we get depreciation passed on? And what is your fees you take? I mean, this is a little bit more beyond this. You probably should set up an appointment with her to talk. However, you can just talk about the first 2. Maybe,
Yeah. So typically, just like in any multifamily deal, when you syndicate, individuals get to invest in those projects. This particular one that I'm currently working on is a 506B, but I'm happy to share details of upcoming projects that are there. And we usually have a minimum investment of 50,000. But yeah, that's really how you can get started. In all honesty, like when I first started in real estate investing, I actually ended up starting when I transitioned, I actually converted my IRA into a self-directed IRA. That was actually one of the first projects that I invested in when I learned about this like a few years ago, before I, started to get in more as on the GP side of things, so being a little bit more active. But that's actually one, great way to get involved, is to be able to go in and invest as an LP and learn about the LP side of things and learn a little bit more about what goes on into the project. And the depreciation part of it is also another reason why I actually got started and I invested in deals, is just like between the bonus depreciation, and if there are opportunities where they do the cost seg, then that's something that you're able to leverage as well. Again, this would be very specific to those individuals. I'm no tax strategist. You definitely want to get a tax strategist and discuss that specifically in your case, in terms of how much is going to be relevant to you. I think it's very individual to your, not just your income, but also whether like you're active, passive, and how it gets applied. But that's essentially how the depreciation gets passed down. You'll get a K1 at the essentially yearly, where you'll have the breakdown of it. I hope that was helpful, Bhavin.
I see a question above, actually.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much for this session. It's been very informative. The question I have for you is for those that invest as limited partners. And most of the people that I know, that I'm aware of, are usually W-2 employees. And obviously, they fall into the categories of not being able to utilize their losses because of the passive loss rules and all of that stuff. So my question to you is, when you began your investments, how were you able to navigate the limitations posed by the passive loss limitation, where you could do losses from your syndication deals? Did you have other passive income to offset your losses, or how were you able to navigate that limitation?
Yeah, in my case particularly, I was able to, when I actually left my W-2, I got involved on single family sites. So I was doing active real estate work. So I was able to leverage that to get some of my depreciation. Again, that is not something that's applicable to everyone, right? Because you might have a W-2 and not really doing real estate specifically to claim some of those deductions. And that's why I was saying, I think you want to speak to your CPA so they can better guide you to what is more appropriate to you and how you're able to take some of those tax deductions.
I think
Okay, did you qualify for the reps?
CPA.
Okay.
What's that?
I just wanted to know because
she's our CPA.
Yeah, I just wanted to know because a lot of people come, and I'm a CPA myself, and I see a lot of W-2 employees that invest in deals and with the motive of implementing or utilizing the depreciation, but without the reps status, without having a spouse that qualifies for reps, without short-term rental loopholes, it becomes very difficult. Yeah. And so it's a very difficult conversation to have with them when you see this huge tax bill and they have suspended losses that they cannot utilize. And it makes us feel bad some way, because you're explaining to them that unfortunately cannot use this loss, but they usually come back and say, oh, but I've seen people utilize these losses. Can you explain to me why I cannot utilize these losses? But it's very good that we're having this conversation, at least so people are aware that there are some rules that have to be followed to be able to really take advantage of some of these strategies as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's obviously so powerful. And in all honesty, when I got into short-term rental, I didn't know that there was such a huge tax advantage that I had until when I went to my CPA and they were like, oh, you're doing this. Okay, these are some of the things that you're able to leverage. At the time, obviously, I could have done cost seg, but I didn't. But there are definitely certain things that you can leverage to take those deductions. But yeah, no, really good question.
I was definitely one of those LPs who didn't understand the difference, and I thought I was going to get all these tax breaks and then found out it doesn't apply to W-2. But what I did find is that the passive losses counted against my medical office building investment income that I was getting from that. Surgeons, particularly, I can speak to that group. If you have, most surgeons do invest in a surgery center. So you can use your multifamily passive losses against the income that you make on the surgery center, because that's passive as well. And when I found that out, it was a little bit better. It was like, okay, I never had to pay taxes on any of the income I made from the surgery center. And hopefully other doctors can invest in different types of medical office building passively. You invest in just the entity. Even though you may be having your practice there, you're still investing in the entity as like its own investment. And that is considered passive. So that's, Taiwo maybe can speak to that, but that was a nice surprise, a nice little consolation prize. Not getting my W-2 tax breaks.
Yeah.
I often tell investors also, even though you have the loss and you can't use it now, it's not gone. And for example, when I started investing, right before, my wife is a nurse, but eventually she decided after doing the analysis, like just stay home, okay? And let's just do this with reps, because there's no way I'm going to become reps based on the income and how much hours I spend at work. But in the beginning, so I was investing, but after a while, you're going to get into a situation that after the third year, some deals are exited, right? I understand that, yes, you have a few years that you can't use it, but as those deals are exiting and the capital event happens, then I'm getting to a new deal. So it just becomes like a snowball now, in which, as I'm getting this depreciation, I'm exiting another deal, and the 100K came up, then I use this one against it. So it was just now build up momentum of like tax savings. So even though you may not get it now, just continue to invest every year. After a while, it will start to basically supplement each other, in that way. And also, the one that you actually invested in, let's say you double your money, eventually you're going to exit, right? That deal also. So, yeah, you can use it against it also. So I just feel like, yes, you don't use it against the W-2 because we feel like, oh, we have to. But you can also use it against other, like you said, like George said, and also personal properties too. That happened with me. I was buying some other properties and then I will use the syndication against. So you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you wanted to add something?
I know, I think she's applauding your strategy.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to respect everyone's time. I know this went over. Very enjoyable, Rashmi. You got a lot of audience, and also people stayed even after. So yeah, I see someone said I can attest to the snowballing effect of what happens when deals comes to fruition. So yeah, it's been our investor, Emmanuel, for a while, many years. So he's been seeing some exit now. Very happy. Okay, anything else to add? And then we'll go conclude.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys. This was great. Have a great audience here and just so good. Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming.